So, Monster Hunter's in a pretty great spot at the moment. There's a new game on the horizon. A lot of people are talking about the franchise right now. The games have never really stopped being good, and World's player base skyrocketed pretty much just because Capcom asked us to play their game, and we all said, okay. It's a good time to be a fan of Monster Hunter. It's a good time to be Monster Hunter. However, it's also undeniable that not every fan of Monster Hunter is a fan of this particular era of the franchise. And that happens, right? Series change. Sometimes things that people really liked about a series shift just a little bit too much, and an element that they really admired about some of the older games just kind of isn't there anymore. Sometimes a game series gets a little too streamlined for older fans when said series gets more popular. I get it. It's understandable. The way I see it, there's a power play Capcom can do to make a lot of people really happy. On top of that, I honestly think it'd be just pretty healthy for Monster Hunter. Now, I am not gonna make another prediction timeline diatribe, because we were off by about 3 months on that last one. But hey, we got an anniversary coming up for Monster Hunter in March, and they're not taking time in that showcase to show anything about Wilds. We gotta wait until summer for an update there, and we gotta wait until sometime in 2025 for that actual game to come out. So, minimum 11 months. Wouldn't be the worst idea for Capcom to maintain the hype momentum off of the Return to World campaign during this Monster Hunter dry spell with a release maybe towards like the later end of the spring, right? Because they probably still want to give Dragon's Dogma 2 some time to marinate. Again, I ain't promising you, so don't yell at me if nothing comes out of this, all right? I'm here to illustrate why it would be a good idea for the old Monster Hunter games to come back. So let's cut to the chase then, right? Porting or remastering or whatevering some of the pre-generations Monster Hunter games would be awesome. Just kind of straight up. And there's a lot of reasons why. I say pre-generations because Generations Ultimate is still easily accessible and on the still up and running Nintendo Switch. Most Monster Hunter games before that, not as easy to get your hands on, and mostly devoid of multiplayer functionality at this time. The 3DS and Wii U were home to some absolutely phenomenal games in this series, namely 4U and 3U, but those consoles are out of production, their games are only going to get more expensive from here on out, and their online functionality, as I said, is dead. Tri's multiplayer has also been gone for years off the Wii, and the same exact scarcity and cost issues are likely going to apply for the PSP, the PS2, and their Monster Hunter games. So it's a little tough to get some of these classics legitimately at the moment. And that's a pretty massive shame. There really isn't a bad traditional Monster Hunter game out there. Even the original Monster Hunter game, with its obtuse mechanics and its very unorthodox control scheme, has its share of merits. You know, it created Monster Hunter. It's a pretty important piece of gaming history considering how big Monster Hunter is now and what's been inspired in the wake of the franchise. It'd be great to have at least some of the classic Monster Hunter games placed back into proper circulation. They deserve to be played. They deserve to be enjoyed. These are good games, well-made games. There's no reason for them not to be played. There's no reason for them not to be accessed. There's no reason for them, not to be making the company that made them money. Now, there are unofficial methods of acquiring these games, and that's all well and good, due to the power of the internet. A lot of games will never ever be truly lost media, and that's awesome. But here's the thing, people are willing to pay for it. Crazy concept, I know, I discovered that all by myself. It'd be nice to have these games back on the proper markets. I'd be willing to buy them right from the source. Yeah, more than happy. And the majority of Monster Hunter fans probably feel the same way. People are happy to drop money on companies who give them what they want. And the iron for Monster Hunter is hot. There's buzz about Wilds, and that's not coming out till at least next year. Return to World was overwhelmingly, stupidly, massively successful, and Capcom barely had to do a thing for that. There's a ton of eyes on Asmongold playing through World and Iceborne right now. Monster Hunter is big right this second. And there hasn't been a new game released since March of 2021. Monster Hunter Now doesn't count. And Rise hasn't had an update since last June. So this should be a mega dry spell for the game series. And it's not. That should tell you both how powerful this franchise is and how smart an idea it would be to relaunch some of the old games. Just, from a business sense. People are talking about Monster Hunter. People want to play Monster Hunter. People are eager to get their hands on it, but you don't really have anything that's being updated or being put out in a good chunk of time. So there's a gap you can fill. So keeping that momentum going with some kind of port or remaster could literally pay off really well. So why are these games important? Why should they be back on the market? Are they worth playing when the flashier, more polished, more high-tech Rise and World are right there for the picking? Do the classics hold up, or is there just a whole lot of rose-tinted glasses looking at them? Fair question, but nah man, these games are good. Maybe a bit clunky, maybe not as user-friendly as the newer games are, and yeah, they are a little dated in a few places. Item consumption's still kind of weird, hitboxes don't work in a couple of places, some of the animations take way longer than they should have. Gathering's still kind of tedious, but none of this stuff really makes for a bad game. It's old rust of a previous era. You know what else is dated? KOTOR. KOTOR still kicks ass today, but they probably stopped making games like that for a reason. With like the dice rolls and the fact that it's kind of like this pseudo real-time action game and this kind of pseudo turn-based game, but it's not blended together the best, but it's still like kind of charming and fun to figure out, but also doesn't really tell you exactly what's going on. It's still a really good game, but it's weird by some of the design standards we got going on today. And there can be a lot of charm around older games with some rough patches but solid foundations. There's a lot of good to be found even in games that aren't streamlined down to like the finest points of optimization like some newer titles are. Old Monster Hunter is tough. Especially second and first generation Monster Hunter. Your tools are limited. Monsters hit really hard. Your animations are less fluid and they don't cancel into one another as quickly. Your movements are slower and more deliberate. Monster gimmicks can be a bit more pertinent to the actual battles and annoying if you don't have the proper skills or items to combat them. Defensive skills are more necessary. Your weapons have less attacks than you're used to from the 5th generation games. Some of the limitations and roadblocks and frustrations of the classics make them a ton of fun and extremely satisfying. A lot of the time, said limitations can make individual decision-making feel like they matter a lot more. Each item that you use or each attack that you throw out should be done very intelligently. Quick and flashy and a little bit more forgiving and more uptime in the actual combat can be really cool, sure, but sometimes, man, it's a ton of fun to just play around in the mud and get kicked in the balls by a game that's unforgiving yet mostly fair. And World and Rise provide these feelings in a somewhat smaller supply than their predecessors. If Wilds removes the ability for me to fully restock all my items for free out of the box in the tent, I will be a happy man. Sometimes player limitations make for more thrilling gameplay than player options, and I feel like classic Monster Hunter understood this very well. I think it'd just be good if more people got to experience these games. A lot of them were super niche when they came out originally. Monster Hunter only really got big about like 6 years ago. A lot of guys and girls we have in the community now are new from World and Rise. And maybe a couple of them went back and played Generations Ultimate because it's on the Switch right now, and maybe a couple more of those dug back even a little bit further and got their hands on some of the older games, but I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that a lot of the new hunters in the community have a somewhat limited experience with the Monster Hunter titles preceding Worlds. I'd be curious to see people go backwards and experience Monster Hunter in its younger state. Yeah, there's gonna be some instant gratification dopes who scream about the games being trash on Twitter, and the games journalist articles are probably gonna be mostly pretty garbage, but I imagine the majority will really enjoy themselves and learn the tough love of the classic games. games. And honestly, one thing a lot of the new blood will have as an advantage is that they'll have experience with the skill systems and the charm systems and decorations and rewards and combining from the more new player friendly games we have now. That'll prevent them from being as lost with said mechanics as some of us veterans were the first time we played the older games. Okay, so next question. What gets re-released? That's tough because there's no really bad answer. You want to re-release just the original Monster Hunter for its 20th birthday? I think there's better games to choose, but that makes a lot of thematic sense. What about 4 Ultimate, a beloved fan favorite that was probably like that first major boulder in the avalanche of worldwide popularity for Monster Hunter right before World became the Avalanche proper? You could do Tri Ultimate, that's a fantastic game. It's absolutely stacked with content, and yet it came out right before Monster Hunter started indulging in endless grind endgames. So it's a much more concise title than many of the games that came after it. You could do Freedom Unite, which is essentially the culmination of the entire original era of Monster Hunter, summed up in an absolute classic masterpiece of the PSP. What about Monster Hunter G, DOS, Portable Third, or the original 4? Translate some of the games that never got a wide release. Beat Mother 3 to that punch. There's better answers, but no bad answers, and Monster Hunter games are huge. Even a comparatively light title like Tri could be enjoyed for a few hundred hours pretty easily. The ideal dream, right, is a collection. And man, that would be a lot of game. If they dropped a whole box set of classic Monster Hunters, I am not 100% sure that the distance between spring and 2025 would be enough time to play all of that, and I'm not even really joking. Like at all. I'll still take it though. Too much Monster Hunter ain't the worst problem to have. I think that if I had to go for the absolute best case dream scenario, it'd be a collection of Freedom Unite, Tri Ultimate, and 4 Ultimate. Hell, you could even, throw in original DOS and Portable Third if you wanted to get in just like every single little scrap of Monster Hunter content that you could get out of a collection. But that is an absolute mountain of game. FU, Tri-U, and 4U are the complete versions of 3 massive eras of Monster Hunter. There is content that some of them do lack for sure. They don't cover up every single individual base that Monster Hunter's history has to offer, but they do contain every monster, every map, and likely just about every set of armor and weapons that the games within their respective eras had. I'd say that would absolutely be the most efficient collection you could put out, the most content spread over the least games. If it had to be just one game, that's not easy to answer. As I said earlier, really don't think there's a wrong answer, just better answers. I think Freedom Unite would probably be my first choice, since it's almost the entire first 4 years of Monster Hunter combined into a single title, with a couple of little bits dropped here and there. 4 Ultimate's also an extremely good option. There's an argument to be made that it's still the best Monster Hunter ever created. I don't think I would be upset with any option, save for, maybe like Freedom 2, because Freedom Unite's right there. Why not just do the expansion? Multi-platform would probably make the most sense for release. If these games could run on the 3DS and consoles younger than that, then they should run perfectly fine on the Switch, the PlayStation, the Xbox, and Steam. No doubt. Unless the developers get mega super lazy and botch the ports. I don't see any real reason, besides maybe some legal obligation I'm unaware of, to not put these older Monster Hunters out everywhere. And, hey, here's the real kicker. If you wanted to do a multi-platform release of some older Monster Hunter games, Capcom, that could be a magnificent testing ground for Monster Hunter crossplay before Wilds comes out. I'm just saying. And that actually transitions us into another important question about re-releasing any of these games. What format of re-release would we want to go for? Straight up ports, remasters, a soft remake, or like a full remake in the vein of some of the recent Resident Evil releases? Off the bat, my first choice would definitely not be a complete and total remake of any of the games, meaning that the ideas of a classic Monster Hunter game, its maps, its monsters, and all that, be just transformed into a totally new game, probably in a similar vein to World of Rise. First of all, Monster Hunter is a pretty forward-moving franchise that loves to to innovate and evolve. Going back and trying another game again is something I doubt the developers are super interested in. So a full remake would likely be outsourced, and I'm sure another company or team within Capcom could do a decent job remaking one of the older games, but I think I'd rather the classics be properly preserved and celebrated and not used as frameworks for new games with the same name. The whole point of this video has been that the classics are fantastic games, that they still hold up in many respects and deserve to be enjoyed by newer fans. I certainly wouldn't be upset if an older Monster Hunter got a full remake treatment. I'd probably be excited in the moment, honestly, but it's not what I want the most. A soft remake could be interesting. That would likely also be outsourced and would only be a singular title. With a soft remake, it's effectively the same exact game, but rebuilt from near scratch. It's kind of like what Thousand Year Door is getting right now. So you have more up-to-date technology, more up-to-date source code, graphics, mechanical touch-ups, but the game at face value is almost 100% the same. Not a bad option, but I would be worried about just how many features might be quality of life out of such a title. I have my criticisms about some of the design choices in the original Monster Hunter games for sure, but I wouldn't want some of their rough around the edges rustic charm to be just smoothed out completely, resulting in a game that lacks the pomp and circumstance of the newer Monster Hunter games and the unforgiving ruggedness of the originals. And again, I want the classics themselves to be actually preserved. Best bet would be remasters, at least I think so. You can give the visuals and audio a nice bump, maybe smooth out any bugs here and there. I'm not entirely sure if remasters would allow for the implementation of crossplay. I believe that would mostly come down to how much of the old source code still exists to be played around with. That's a topic a bit beyond my expertise to really discuss. Remasters are still a ton of work. If you got a remaster, it would probably still be a singular title unless they've been working on this project in secret. It just hasn't come out for a good long while. You could also just go for a much more straightforward port, which would be the games adapted for new hardware with very minimal changes whatsoever. This would be acceptable. I think older Monster Hunter titles generally still look pretty good, and after picking up Freedom Unite again via certain means, I can attest that the controls are honestly still pretty responsive, and it feels good to play with the PS5 controller. I've yet to feel like I'm battling with the game to get it to do what I need it to do. So with this one example in mind, I'm confident enough to say that in their current state, the older games are definitely still well made and mostly stand the test of time with some issues here and there. You could just port them over mostly untouched, and though this would be unambitious, I think it would be fine. And if you want to do a whole collection, it's probably more realistic that it be ports instead of full remasters. Because again, these games are huge. Remastering any of them would be a ton of work. Porting them would probably still be a lot of work. Much like the selection of games I want to see re-released, I don't think there's necessarily a wrong answer for how you would want to re-release them. But there are options, I think, that are better than others. Remakes could be cool, but I think I would really want the original games themselves in rotation. I think they're genuine classics. I think most of them are still really fun to play despite their age. I think new players would mostly enjoy them, flaws and rust and all. And I think the games just deserve to be easily accessible, and players deserve to have them easily accessed. And here's the thing, if you put Monster Hunter, Freedom Unite, 4 Ultimate, any of them properly back on the market, then you would have me more interested in full-on remakes. Because in case you change something too much, the original title is still there. Remasters, I think, are probably the best way to go. Probably, again, still a crap load of work, but, a fresh coat of visual, audio, and mechanical optimization paint could really tighten up what are already fantastic games. So to sum up, I think this would just be a great idea. Business-wise, it's a dry year with hot iron. You want to strike that, fill that gap from, May until whenever Wilds comes out. I think you could do that pretty easily with a port. And then when we hit the back half of the year, you get Wilds' marketing campaign going at full force. It's good for just game preservation and would put some phenomenal games into the hands of a much larger audience than they ever had for their first go-around. So, Let me know down below, which old Monster Hunter games do you want to see re-released and in what format? This has been CR-Volcanic or Connor. I'll see you around. Shout out to all the patrons, and special shout out to Nihilus Chimerax, Datboy Doindading, and Pico Plush. Thanks a lot, guys.